Hello Horror Nights and YouTube channel, and welcome back to another video. My name is Crystal, and on this channel I talk about everything strange, spooky, and unusual on the internet. So sit back, relax, and listen as I tell you the story about the Ouija board. Let's get into the video. Set the scene for you. It's Saturday night and you're hanging out with a group of your friends and you guys are bored when you decide to pull out the old dusty Ouija board that's in your basement. The board hasn't been used in years, but you remember exactly where it is. You take it out, dust it off, and start playing. You start to ask it questions and the planchette moves and you're freaking each other out. But then the planchette starts to move on its own and it starts to spell out the words, "I lie to you." You immediately stop playing the game and you run and you never look back again. Okay, so that was a little dramatic, but I was just trying to set the scene for you, you know? Okay, so let's talk about the strange history of the Ouija board. We are gonna go all the way back to 1981 when the first advertisements for the Ouija board were found in the newspapers. And it read, "The Ouija board, the wonderful talking board." The advertisement continued, describing it as a magical device that answered questions about the past, the present, and the future with marvelous accuracy, and it promised never-ending amusement and recreation for all classes. A link between the known and the unknown, and you could get all of this at a price of $1.50. The board was essentially the same thing that we see at our local stores in the game aisles. A flat board with the letters of the alphabet, the numbers 0 through 9, the words yes and no in the uppermost corners, and goodbye at the bottom. You also get a trusty planchette with a small window that you use to move around the board. You and your friends sit around the board with your fingertips on the planchette and ask the board whatever it is that you want and feel and watch as it answers your questions. Another interesting thing that I'm going to talk about is that in order for the board to be manufactured, it had to be proven to the patent office that it worked. Ouija historian Robert Munch has been studying the history of the Ouija board since 1992. And he has been quoted to have said, "For something to have strike the fear in American hearts, how do we not know its origin story?" Okay, so we're gonna have a little bit of a history lesson right now, okay? Did you know back in the 1800s, there was a movement and it was called the spiritualist movement? Yes, it was a thing, and I'm going to explain to you a little bit about it. It was the year 1848, and the Fox sisters, who lived in upstate New York, claimed to receive messages from spirits who rapped on the walls. It answers to the questions that the sisters had asked. And once this was shared from one neighbor to the other, many people across America sought out the spirits to answer their questions, and it was guilt-free, meaning that they could hold a seance in their homes on Saturday nights and go to church on Sunday mornings. What else is interesting about this theory is that there wasn't modern medicine like we have nowadays. So people were dying left and right, and their family members didn't really have the closure that they were looking for. Remember, this was the time of the Civil War, so soldiers would go out and fight their battles, and sometimes they wouldn't return home. So this was a way for their wives and their children and their family members to seek some kind of closure. Even Mary Todd Lincoln would hold seances in the White House after their 11-year-old son died of a fever in 1862. Do you guys think the White House is haunted? I feel like it's haunted. So because this phenomenon of talking to spirits was taking over America, businessman Elijah Bond had the idea to patent the planchette to sell along with the board with the alphabet printed on it. But then an employee of his, William Feud, started production of his own board under the name Ouija. He claimed that he got the name from the board itself when he was using it. So essentially the board named itself. And it can be translated to mean good luck. A little cryptic, a little sinister. I like it. But as I was doing my research, it is said that the board presented itself to his name not to William, but actually to Elijah Bond's sister-in-law, Helen Peters, who was a very strong medium in her time. And she is known to have supplied the planchette, as we know what it looks like today. Okay, so now we have this board, we have this planchette, but in order to start manufacturing it, they needed a patent. And what I mean by that is Bond and his sister-in-law had to prove that it worked. So they went to the patent office in Washington, and the chief patent officer made them a deal. If they could use the board and spell the patent officer's name correctly, then he would sign the patent for them. And the board did just that. But I am going to challenge this a little bit, because who's to say that Bond and his sister, or at least Bond himself, didn't already know the patent officer's name? But I digress. Regardless of all of that, the patent for the Ouija board was signed. And the thing about the patent for the Ouija board is that it never really explained how it works. It just says what it does. And it was all part of the marketing scheme to not explain fully how it works, which adds to the mystery of the board itself. So this is where William Feud comes back into the picture. He was essentially running the Ouija board company under Bond. But when internal struggles and pressure and money got to Bond and his sister-in-law, they both stepped away from the company. So this is when William took over. Also, another interesting thing to note is that William never said that he invented the board at all, even though when he died, his obituary stated otherwise. Here is when things start to go a little strange. William died in 1927 after a freak fall from the roof of his new factory that the Ouija board told him to build. He was on the roof overseeing an installation of a new flag when the iron railing that he was leaning on gave way and he fell. The coroner reported that a broken rib had pierced his heart, and it is stated that he made his children promise to never sell the rights of the Ouija board to anyone outside of their family. And they did not sell it, but then they did 40 years later. And who did they sell it to? The Parker brothers, who quickly moved the production to the base camp of their operations. And where was that? It was in Salem, Massachusetts. And this was in 1967. And it was the first year that the Parker brothers were headquartered in this infamous town of the witch trials. And it sold 2 million boards. At the time, it was sort of marketed as a romantic tool. And what I mean by that is the couple could sit with their knees touching and their fingertips on the planchette also touching. When this happens, you have a heightened sense of fear from just playing the game, but also being close to the person that you're playing the game with. What added to this as well was Norman Rockwell painted a well-dressed man and a young woman playing the game in this fashion for a cover of the Saturday Evening Post in 1920. So what changed the persona of this game? Well, Hollywood. Hollywood changed it. Do you guys remember a little movie called The Exorcist? Of course you do. In the film, Reagan decided to play the Ouija board, where she spoke to Captain Howdy, who eventually was the demon that possessed her in the film. And this, my friends, is where it's birthed the idea that the spirits that we were talking to may not be so lucky. As I continued to do my research, some of the explanations that I got to how the Ouija board works were a little bit more scientific than you might think. Many of us believe that the planchette that we are using is moving on its own. But have you ever heard of the ideometer effect? It was first identified in 1852 by Sigmund Freud and his theory of the unconscious mind. And this theory was built upon by Dr. William Benjamin Carter, that our unconscious mind has the ability to direct motor activity. So basically what that means, parts of our brain that we are not aware are actually controlling some things, could also control our muscle movement in our fingers. Many researchers started to explore the idea that the Ouija board could unlock parts of our unconscious minds. But of course, this motor skill effect is not a popular theory of why these boards work the way they do. Headlines are more interesting when it involves the strange and unusual. Like this one in 1921, when a woman was sent to a psychiatric hospital after she told doctors that the Ouija board told her to keep her dead mother in her living room for 15 days before she buried her in their backyard. And in 1931, 2 Buffalo women killed another woman because the Ouija board told them to do so. And there are countless stories all over the internet of people talking about the things that happened to them when they played the Ouija board. And of course we have films like Paranormal Activity, The Exorcist, Ouija Origin of Evil. The board has also been deemed as far from harmless from a lot of religious groups. And it warns anyone who's deciding to play this game. For me personally, I have no interest in playing the Ouija board game because it's just really scary, especially from, I mean, even after the research that I've done, when it could be something about our unconscious minds versus like it not being demons, I still don't want to play it. No judgment on anyone who does play it or does own one. And just in case you're wondering, this behind me, it's not a Ouija board. It's just a tray that looks cool, but it is not a Ouija board. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and thank you so much for being here. New videos on this channel drop every single Wednesday. Also stay tuned for a new segment called Whisper Down the Alley on my podcast, where I tell you a very spooky story every Friday night in October leading up to Halloween. And don't miss my Made podcast, where I upload episodes on there every single Monday, where I talk about horror movies, the good, the bad, the old, and the new. And finally, remember to stay safe and stay spooky, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.